Seraphine Voss had learned very early in life that some secrets are not kept out of selfishness. Some secrets are kept out of love. And the one she carried for 7 years was the heaviest kind. The kind that pressed against her ribs every morning when she woke up and saw her son sleeping beside her, his silver eyes closed, his small chest rising and falling, looking more like his father with every passing day. She lit the 7 candles on his birthday cake with steady hands. She had practiced that steadiness for years. She had practiced smiling when she felt like breaking, practiced answering questions simply when the truth was complicated, practiced living a quiet life in a small cottage at the edge of Silvercrest, as if she had never known anything larger, as if she had never stood in a field hospital at the border of a war and met the most powerful man in the known world, and felt, in the space of a single moment, that the world had rearranged itself around the two of them. Cale ran into the kitchen with his socks sliding on the wooden floor and his dark hair sticking up in every direction. He was 7 years old that morning. He was also, though he did not know it yet, the son of a king. He looked at the cake. He looked at his mother. He grinned the way only a child who has not yet learned how complicated the world is can grin. With his whole face, with his whole heart. Seraphine smiled back. She was very good at smiling. She had met King Draven Ashvale 8 years ago, during the border war that nearly tore the 5 wolf kingdoms apart. She had been sent as part of a small healers team to the front. A young Omega with good hands and a calm head, assigned to a field hospital that smelled of pine and blood and fear. She had expected to stitch wounds, mix medicines, and stay invisible. She had not expected the man they carried in on the 3rd night, broad-shouldered and pale from blood loss, with silver eyes that opened and fixed on her, with an alertness that had no business existing in someone that injured. He did not tell her who he was. She did not ask. For 3 days and 2 nights, while the war raged on the other side of the ridge, she kept him alive. She changed his bandages. She argued with him when he tried to get up too soon. She talked to him about nothing important. The way the light moved through the tent in the morning, the particular stubbornness of the soldiers she treated, the small things that kept a person sane when everything around them was not. He listened as if every word she said mattered. He talked back in a low, careful voice that she felt she could have listened to for a very long time. She did not name what grew between them during those days. She was practical by nature. She knew better than to put a name to something that existed in the middle of a war, in a tent, between a woman who had no rank and a man she barely knew. But on the last night, when the fighting had quieted, and the camp was almost still, he had looked at her across the space between their 2 cots and said, quietly, that he had never met anyone like her, and she had known, in a way that went beyond words or logic, that she had never met anyone like him either. Then morning came. One of his men arrived with a message and a horse, and she overheard, she was not meant to, but she did, the news that King Draven Ashvale's political engagement to Lady Vela Thornvast had been formally announced to the 5 kingdoms that very week. The wedding would bind the Eastern Council to the Ashvale throne. It would end the war. It would save thousands of lives. She had her answer before he could offer her anything. Some things are bigger than 2 people. She knew that. She had always known that. She left before he was fully well. She did not say goodbye. She told herself it was kinder. She told herself it was the only reasonable thing to do. She rode back to Silvercrest, and she buried what had happened somewhere deep inside herself, and she did not look at it again. 6 weeks later, she discovered she was carrying his child. She sat with that knowledge for a long time before she decided what to do with it. She thought about sending word to the palace. She imagined, very clearly, what would happen if she did. The political alliance would shatter. The wedding would be questioned. Lady Vela's family, the most powerful pack council in the East, would never forgive the disruption. And her child, a baby born between an Omega healer with no standing and a king already promised to another, would be used, or threatened, or simply made to disappear by people with more power than she could ever fight. She moved to the outermost edge of Silvercrest. She found the small cottage. She learned which herbs, taken in precise amounts, could mask the particular scent that an alpha bloodline left on its children. She raised her son. She gave him a common surname. She told him his father had been a kind man who died in the war. She told herself she was protecting him. Every day she told herself that. For 7 years, she almost believed it. The candles on the cake were burning low when it happened. Kale leaned in to blow them out, cheeks puffed, eyes squinted with effort, the way children do when they are concentrating on something very important. Then he blew, and the candles went out all at once, every one of them, but so did something else. A wave of energy moved through the cottage like a held breath suddenly released. The kitchen window cracked straight down the middle. Every pot on the shelf rattled. Seraphine grabbed the counter. Outside, in the lane, she heard someone's dog begin to bark and then go abruptly silent. Kale looked at his hands. He looked at his mother. He said, very quietly, "I did not mean to do that." Seraphine crossed the room and knelt in front of him. She took his face in her hands. She was fighting to keep her voice even. "I know," she said. "I know you did not." But she also knew what it meant. The suppression had held for 7 years. It had broken this morning, and the scent now rolling off her son in slow, unmistakable waves was nothing she could mask or explain or run from. It was ancient. It was powerful. It was the scent of a royal alpha bloodline that had not walked these roads in living memory. Every wolf within a quarter mile would already know something had changed. The patrol arrived within the hour. There were 6 of them, border soldiers in dark uniform, disciplined and polite in the way that people are, when they are also very serious about what they have come to do. Seraphine opened the door before they could knock. She stood in the frame with Kale pressed against her side, and she looked at the man leading them. Commander Rael Ashvale was the king's younger brother. She recognized him from descriptions, from the few portraits she had seen in old news sheets. He was not as tall as his brother, but he had the same eyes. When those eyes landed on Kale, he stopped walking. He stood completely still for several seconds, and then he looked at Seraphine, and there was nothing accusing in his expression, only something careful and quiet, and very, very certain. "You need to come with us," he said. "Both of you." She did not argue. She had known this day would come. She had simply hoped it would not come while Kale still had birthday cake on his shirt. The journey to the palace took 3 days. Kale asked her, on the second evening, sitting beside a fire while the soldiers stood at a respectful distance, whether his father was the king. He said it the way children say true things, simply, without drama, with eyes that were waiting for honesty. Seraphine looked at her son for a long moment. She thought about all the years she had carried this. She thought about every careful answer, every half-truth. Every morning she had watched him sleep and felt the weight of what she had not told him pressing against her chest. "Yes," she said. Kale was quiet for a while. Then he nodded slowly, the way he did when he was absorbing something large. "Is he going to be angry?" "I do not know," she said honestly, "but I think we are going to find out." King Draven was in the middle of a meeting with his war council when they arrived. Commander Rael entered the room without ceremony and stepped aside. Seraphine walked in. Kale walked beside her, his hand in hers, looking at everything with the wide, serious eyes of a child who has decided to be brave. The room went silent, the way rooms go silent when something happens that no one was prepared for. King Draven stood at the head of the table. He was exactly as she remembered him, broader now, older, with lines at the corners of his eyes that had not been there 8 years ago. He looked at her. He looked at the boy beside her. And the expression on his face moved through something she did not have words for, something that started with shock and moved through recognition and ended in a stillness so total that it felt louder than any sound in the room. He walked toward them slowly. He stopped in front of Kale. He crouched down until he was at the boy's eye level, and he studied his son's face the way a person looks at something they had given up believing they would ever find. Kale looked back at him without blinking. After a long moment, King Draven looked up at Seraphine. "How long?" he asked. His voice was very quiet. 7 years, she said, 4 months, and 12 days. He held her gaze. She did not look away. She had made her choice 8 years ago with her eyes open, and she was going to answer for it the same way. The trial before the Five Kingdom Council was set 3 weeks later. The charge was serious. Concealment of a royal heir was, under ancient wolf law, a crime against the pack order. Seraphine stood before 5 council tables, in a room full of people who held more power in their names than she had ever held in her life, and she told them the truth, every year of it. She did not make excuses. She explained what she had feared, what she had calculated, what she had chosen, and why. She told them that she had hidden her son not to keep him from his father, but to keep him alive in a world that had not yet decided what to do with children it found inconvenient. The room was very quiet when she finished. On the fourth day of deliberation, King Draven walked into the council chamber and set his crown down on the table in front of the assembled lords. He said, in a voice that did not waver, that he had spent 8 years governing 5 kingdoms according to the principle that order required sacrifice. He said he had accepted a political marriage he did not want because he believed it was what duty required. He said that he had been wrong, not about the duty, but about the sacrifice. He said that the woman who stood before this council had made an impossible choice in a world that gave her no safe options, and that the least he could do was be honest about his own role in those circumstances. He named Chaol as his rightful heir before every kingdom's representatives. He acknowledged Seraphine as his true bonded partner, and he asked the council, calmly, what they intended to do next. The vote to pardon Seraphine was not unanimous, but it passed. Lady Vela Thornvast, who had been married to a king who could never fully love her, had requested a private meeting with Seraphine 2 days before the vote. What they said to each other in that room remained between the two of them. What the world saw afterward was Lady Vela stepping before the Eastern Council and stating publicly that she would not be used as a reason to harm a child. It was the bravest thing anyone had seen a high-ranking pack lady do in many years. She lost her political alliance. She kept her dignity. Within 2 years, she would become the head of the Eastern Council in her own right, the first woman to hold that position in 4 centuries. She said, later, that Seraphine's honesty had given her the courage to find her own. The years that followed were not simple. Seraphine and Draven did not fall easily back into each other. There was too much history between them, too much time, too much hurt, too much unsaid. They argued. They misunderstood each other. There was a period when they communicated mostly through Chaol, who eventually looked at both of his parents with calm, 7-year-old authority, and told them plainly that he was a child, not a messenger, and they should try talking to each other directly. They tried. It was slow. It was honest. And slowly, the way most real things grow, it became something steady. The political changes that followed Chaol's birthday moved through all 5 kingdoms like a tide that had been building for a long time and finally found a shore. 3 kingdoms revised their succession laws. The system of political marriages that had governed pack alliances for 3 centuries was formally challenged and eventually replaced with a new council framework, one that did not require individuals to be sacrificed for the comfort of those with more power. Omega-ranked wolves across the kingdoms gained protections they had never had before. The first piece of legislation to carry those protections bore Seraphine's name. It was Chaol who proposed it, when he was old enough to stand in a council room and speak for himself, a young man with silver eyes, and his mother's steady hands, and his father's calm, unhurried voice. It passed without a single opposing vote. No one who was there on the morning of his 7th birthday, the cracked window, the rattled pots, the birthday cake with the candles blown out, would have predicted the shape of what came next. Most mornings do not look like turning points. Most ordinary things do not feel like the beginning of something enormous. But sometimes a child blows out his birthday candles, and somewhere across 5 kingdoms, something shifts. And the world, very quietly, becomes a little more honest than it was the day before. Seraphine Voss had kept her secret for 7 years, 4 months, and 12 days. She never regretted doing what she did to keep her son safe. She also never stopped being grateful that the morning finally came when she did not have to hide anymore.